Welcome to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast, where we provide constant improvement to businesses through timely, actionable financial solutions. Do you want answers to your financial questions? Email us at bsp@kaizencpas.com. I'm your host, Mark Valesky. Now let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Kaizen Time. I'm joined by Eric Jorn, a partner here at the firm. What's going on, Eric?
We are just rocking and rolling post-tax season, working with our clients, making sure they have great ideas about what's going on with their business.
Oh, yeah? And that actually works really well with what we're about to talk about, which is when is a good time to go from doing it yourself to actually hiring professional? Is there a number? Is there a certain time where we see like this is the sweet spot? People really need to make a transition at this point.
Definitely. I think this is kind of a multifaceted question. Jeez, I'm using the big words there. Multifaceted question.
Big words, yes.
So that really depends what type of business you have. And that's my favorite word in the tax and accounting space is it depends, because it's true. Every business is different. Every business has a much different structure. It's hard to put, say, like a revenue barrier on it, right? Because
it's not necessarily just, hey, you hit this many dollars.
Yep.
You should absolutely have a CPA.
Yeah, because we could have a, we'll call them a solopreneur. They make, say they do gross $250,000 in revenue per year. We'll say we specialize in businesses that are $500K to about $10 million. It's kind of our sweet spot. But you have a solopreneur who does $250,000. They only have about $50,000 in expenses, and they're going to net $200,000. While they can just say at the end of the year, bring their bank statements, have a tax return filed. Mm-hmm. I think we lack the opportunity for knowing, on a month-to-month basis where we're at from an income standpoint, and then proactively planning their taxes through the rest of the year. So that's somebody that maybe wants to have that relationship up front before they start overpaying in tax. To have all their bookkeeping handled and a tax plan in place is probably less than what they would save in taxes with the proper structuring and the proper planning in place. Mm-hmm. So that's an example when, in reality, if you know that you're going to make sizable profit, mm-hmm. I think it makes sense to start talking right away.
Is there a situation where they can kind of talk to someone and like essentially get an evaluation first?
Yeah, we have these conversations with business owners all the time, right? We have situations where we say, hey, you're not really quite ready to work with us. Maybe you're just starting out and you really don't know where the business is going. If I don't know where my business is going, maybe I don't want to invest the time, effort, and resources to start a relationship with a full service accounting firm. Mm-hmm. However, so that might mean I'm going to handle my bookkeeping for the time being. Mm-hmm. And we'll give advice, right? During an initial consultation, we'll give advice around that, what that looks like, when's the right time to switch, who you even might want to work with in the interim that might work with a business like yours. By far, what are my goals? Where do I see the business going in the next couple of years? If I see this becoming a legit business, I think it's a good time to talk to somebody and consider I should outsource this task because I need to focus on building the business, not doing bookkeeping and trying to DIY and understand information on my own.
So is there a number that we usually see as far as employees in a business? So typically a solopreneur, as you were saying, isn't someone who's going to go to a CPA.
Yeah. Well, so once you start hiring employees, I think it makes sense to now I'm going to outsource my payroll to somebody else, right? Because payroll is an easy thing to screw up. And when you
there are huge ramifications. Yep, we've talked about that.
Yeah, there are more ramifications for screwing up payroll than probably any other aspect of your business. So
it's probably going to sound bad, but you can screw up your taxes and you can, at least that's something you can work with the IRS around.
You can screw up your taxes, you can screw up your bookkeeping. All that stuff is super manageable. Once you start screwing up payroll, right? Not paying your payroll taxes is stealing from your employees.
And that's what kind of law is that breaking? Is that a Federal, state?
I think all of them.
Either way, it's serious. Yeah. Okay.
It's one
I'm
of those.
not a lawyer, clearly.
Yeah, it's one of those things that really that will have an IRS agent knock on your door for not paying payroll
and quickly
taxes. Yep.
too, right?
Yeah,
because all it takes is one employee to complain about that.
It doesn't even take an employee to complain, right? All it takes is for them to figure out that you have not paid your payroll taxes, and they will send a field agent out, and knock on your door, and say, "Hey, what's going on here?" And everybody's biggest fear is that the IRS comes knocking on their door, and that is the one thing that'll do it. So again, if you start hiring employees, you really should be outsourcing your payroll to somebody that knows what they're doing with payroll.
Kind of that, again, we're looking for that magic number where we say, like, this is probably the time when you go from one to...
No, when you go from your first employee, right? So maybe you're a solopreneur and you technically are not an employee of your business. You don't have to run payroll, right? Sole member LLC, sole proprietor. You don't have to run payroll. As soon as you make that first hire, right? And that first hire could be yourself, right? I elect S, I'm become an S Corp shareholder, and I'm providing services to my business. I am now an employee of that S Corp. I should be running payroll for myself. And it goes, so there's a lot of aspects to that. We actually talked about that on a previous podcast episode. And first of all, we got to figure out what to pay myself and what to withhold and all these fun different things. And how do I nuance benefits and all sorts of things like that. So that's a good time to have somebody that I can go talk to for advice, because what should I spend my time doing, right? Should I spend my time Googling all these different situations and trying to figure out the answers, and then trying to figure out how the software works, and then trying to make sure that I'm paying the right amounts and trying to do all this stuff? Should I outsource that and I can focus on, hey, how can I acquire my next customer? How can I improve my workflow, my processes to become more efficient? All those things will have an amplified effect on your business versus, just doing it yourself.
Well, and also think about it this way. If you're growing, if your business is growing, the reason that you're doing all this, hiring more employees, you're hiring employees because you need some people to help you.
Yep.
So it makes sense that you'd be hiring somebody who can also help you too, to take those hats off, as we love to say.
Yep.
So when you start bringing in really your first true employee, and also one thing I want to add is that by talking to a professional, they can help you plan. Again, your visions create alignment.
Yep.
Right. They know where you're going. And that way you can continue to plan your business going in the right direction that goes hand in hand with your bookkeeping.
Exactly. Here's something else to think about, right? So we talked to a lot of business owners, and here's their 9 to 5, or probably really like 9 to 7 is, or 7 to 7, or whatever.
Somewhere in that area.
Somewhere in that area.
When the sun is up,
they're working, right? They're providing their service. They're creating the widgets. They're doing whatever they need to do to run their business. And then we hear a lot of them say, "Oh, and then I go home at night and I work on the back office stuff, and I'm doing the books."
Yep.
So most people have probably a good 8 to 10 hours of solid productive time in them. And now I'm going to spend even more time, so I'm already hitting that. And more than likely, if I'm starting a business, I'm maxed that out, right? I'm probably at the 10 to 12 hours a day. And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to go do bookkeeping, exhausted. It's probably going to be very inefficient for me to do. And then I'm going to wake up the next day and I'm going to be exhausted. Does that make sense? So I guess that's really that's a theoretical time to really think about it, right? Is what I'm doing, right? Maybe I got a business and I'm just starting out. I'm working 3 or 4 hours a day on it because there's not enough activity. I've not grown enough.
Yep.
Then I can fit in the rest of my time. I'm going to figure out my bookkeeping. Great. Now let's go into, but if I'm spending the time running my business on a day-to-day standpoint and I'm doing my accounting and bookkeeping on my free time, I think that's probably not the greatest, most best use of your time to make, especially yourself as a happy, excited business owner.
I mean, it's a quick way to get yourself burned out of your business too.
100%. 100%.
I've seen it. So I guess to wrap this all up.
Yep.
It seems to be less about the numbers and more about the time constraints. If, of course, can you afford it, right? Is your business making enough profit where it's viable
Yep.
to outsource?
Yeah. And we're talking probably factor in for my finance back office, or probably to run payroll, have accounting done, and the accounting software to do that. 1% to 2% of your revenue would be a good budget.
Okay. So, and that, again, that's something to have during the consultation.
Yeah.
But aside from, making the bare bone to make it worth your time, right? Ultimately it is time. Mm-hmm. When you say to yourself, I don't have time to go see my family, or I was like, I don't remember seeing my kids this week. What did we even have? Did I eat dinner with them?
Yeah.
So it's really more about a time crunch.
Yeah.
Right. And also you're paying for the efficiency too, right? What would take you 12 hours could take a CPA too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's no doubt about that. Right. And say my relationship to have my books outsourced, 10 to 15 grand a year. Mm-hmm. It's 10 to 15 grand a year worthwhile to go eat dinner with your family at night.
Well, it's the same thing too. Let's say you run a business. Mm-hmm. You're doing the same thing too. You're offering a service to other people, and they're getting that efficiency of having a professional do it.
Yep.
So you also, again, have to think about, do you have the time? And if you have the money, it's something to, at the bare minimum, look into.
100%. Now let's talk about one more situation. Okay. I either have maybe my spouse is handling the books, mm-hmm. or maybe I hired an internal bookkeeper. Mm-hmm. And when does that look like it's time to switch and outsource that? So what we see is plenty of books that are done by somebody who's not a traditionally trained as an accountant.
Someone who kind of fell into the role.
Exactly. Generally they fell into the role or forced into the role. Hey, I mean, we've found plenty of people whose spouses were accountants, mm-hmm. or they are currently accountants, and then they're handling the books and they're doing a phenomenal job. Mm-hmm. See it all the time. What we see more oftentimes, right? I'm good at, I'm providing the function where bill comes in. I'm going to put the bill into the accounting system. Mm-hmm. I'm going to mark it as, whatever account that I think it is in, and then I'm going to pay that bill. And then, maybe I'm making deposits, maybe I'm recording sales correctly, and I have a pretty good P&L.
Okay.
Then I go to the balance sheet. And the balance sheet gets pretty scary because I don't understand accounting concepts of like, hey, when my employees contribute money to a retirement plan, or we share our cost in a health insurance plan, how does the mechanics behind accounting work for those functions? And all of a sudden we see a big negative balance on the liability section of their balance sheet. And then you say, okay, well, the P&L looks clean, but we have, we're missing $80,000 of expenses that are sitting here on the balance sheet. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you say, hey, if I put $80,000 less of profit in my business, am I making business decisions differently? I think so.
I would say so. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we see things like loans not categorized correctly, right? We were expensing loan payments because that's, loan payment seems like a bill. Put it in the system, categorize it into something. That sounds plausible, but no, loans are put onto you create an amortization schedule. They go on the books. The payment needs between principal and interest. And then when I buy that asset, now I have an asset, and how do I depreciate it? How does that then affect the financial statements? All of a sudden, some complexity around my business and the need to make decisions around my business become very important. Well, I want to make sure my books are very accurate in a way that allows me to make those decisions for my business. And that's a great time when it's time to bring somebody in, right? Mm-hmm. And what that relationship will probably look like is your spouse will still probably do their job, right? Or your bookkeeper. They're going to get the bills in the system. They're going to pay them. They might break down the bills based on what they actually are. Mm-hmm. But then you need somebody to come in and close the books that understands those accounting nuances and how to handle all these different odd transactions, and then also make sure that everything's formatted correctly in a way in which you can make decisions at a snapshot instead of having to untangle a web to make a decision.
Right. And it makes sense. So, and of course, when they're looking at paying a firm, they're paying for the amount of service that they're getting. So it's not that you're going to be offloading everything. You may still have that person working for you doing the books. It's just making sure that they're doing it correctly. So that again, again, we don't want the IRS knocking on anyone's door.
Yeah. I call it inside outside accounting, right? You might have an internal bookkeeper who's going to ensure the data gets entered into the accounting software.
Mm-hmm.
And then the external accountant, their job is to take all that data and make sure that you have a clean, reconciled P&L that you can make good business decisions from.
Perfect. Anything else, Eric? Is that good?
I think that's a great place to cap this off.
I mean, those are a lot of great points. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. If you like what you heard, subscribe and leave a 5-star review. This podcast has been brought to you by Kaizen CPAs Plus Advisors, providing advisory and accounting services to help you grow your business. Learn more at kaizencpas.com or email us at bsb@kaizencpas.com.